two, one, go.
When most parents of young children read this, they think this. But it doesn't have to be that way. In the fall of 2007, my family took our first big trip abroad. I was 7, my brother was 4, and for me, that trip was absolutely unforgettable. If you ask me today, I can tell you any number of details like the Rijksmuseum, the Anne Frank house, the little chocolate shops, or anything else you want to know. But my brother remembers the more atypical things, like sweet waffles, loud swans, and the smell of barnacles. Not your typical photo album. That being said, his unconventional view is the final piece in the puzzle that puts together our joint family memory. I want you all to become comfortable with the idea of traveling abroad with their future very small children because of the long and short-term benefits that this will have on them and on your home family. We can be the ones to create a generation where intercommunication is so strong and relationships are much richer than ever before, both on the diplomatic scale and on the small local scale. The first step is to take advantage of the opportunity to go abroad with your family, taking that first trip and becoming the globe-trotting family that you should be. We took that trip when I was very small, and I remember anything from canal boat trips to winding staircases to cobblestone streets. But my brother doesn't remember these kinds of things. So why did we go abroad? The truth is, your child isn't going to remember all of the same details that you are, but they will retain more than you may think. They'll remember how they felt, and this can have a huge impact on their intellectual and emotional growth and the development of lifelong habits and skills. When it comes to their development of themselves as a person and the development of their character, there's no such thing as too young. When it comes to intellectual benefits, a 2007 Center on Education Policy found that 44% of elementary schools have spent less instructional time on non-testing subjects since the 2002 implementation of No Child Left Behind. We're losing growth-inducing learning in our schools, and it's time for us at home to take initiative and take matters into our own hands. The U.S. Department of Education recently collected data from over 21,000 students and found that kids who travel with their families do far better in reading, math, and general knowledge. And this is because travel significantly heightens young children's degree of cognitive development. Concretely, history and geography are two subjects which are extremely highly benefited by traveling because it gives at least a rudimentary base in those two subjects for later on. National Geographic in 2002 conducted a study and found that 29% of Americans could not locate the Pacific Ocean on a world map. This is a huge problem in today's society when communication between cultures and across the globe via social media, at least, is so ingrained in our culture. We need to be able to have a strong foundation in history and geography, and this can do that. Returning to cognitive growth, at this age, interactive and immersive education is far more impactful than conceptual learning. So, for example, reading about the Dutch masters via a book versus actually seeing and touching the statue recreation of the famous painting The Night Watch in Rembrandt Square makes a world of difference because you can actually interact with it. Children interpret their experiences at this age differently because sensory detail is so strong for them, but this interpretation has value. And it's especially impactful at this time. Exposure to new music and new foods can have a lasting impact on them and stay with them for an extremely long time because their sensory recall will be able to bring them back later in life. Adults may wonder if the experience is worth all of the effort because they may wonder, is the intellectual stimulation really there? Because their children may not be able to even communicate with them about their experiences. But this is only because it's very difficult for children to convey their memories if what they remember is a certain smell or a certain noise. But just because they can't convey this to adults who remember the same experiences in a more visually photographic way doesn't mean that they don't remember it. They do. It's just different. possibly the most important aspect of travel is the intercommunication skills learned while abroad. It's important to understand each other as a global community because of a need to communicate between people. So while abroad, it's much easier to possibly make a friend from another country who may not even speak your language. This is one of the crucial steps in adapting to another culture because true understanding comes from experiencing another person's lifestyle and experiencing it through their eyes. So the first step for your family is to dive into the country and soak up as much of the language, music, art, etc. as you possibly can from this other culture, because it is the easiest way to gain the kind of hands-on discovery that we're missing in schools. So that's one way that you can give your child a significant advantage. These sensory details are also much more potent before the development of societal reservations. It's generally accepted that disgust is a learned trait. For example, Americans tend to turn up their noses at Chinese people's regular consumption of bugs as a part of their diet. Meanwhile, conversely, Chinese people are oftentimes repulsed by Americans' regular consumption of cheese. If we can eliminate these reservations before they even evolve, the possibilities for adaptability in the coming generations are absolutely endless. Adaptability is another huge benefit of traveling because children can learn in the broad setting of a new country that their conduct with the stimuli that they're familiar with at home can be altered in the new country with different, surrounded by a different culture. They can act accordingly. But in smaller settings within that country, like the way you behave in a church or a theater versus a park or a town square is very different. So adapting to those two different kinds of environments is very, very helpful in creating a basis for social interaction while at a very young age. And this can even be applied to critical thinking skills because if for example, you find yourself in a sticky situation where maybe your family is lost and split up in a busy train station, like I know mine was. Children can watch their parents think on the fly and use their own social strategies to possibly consult a map, locate security, or go about solving the issue by any other reasonable means possible. And children can thereby emulate that kind of strategic behavior all while remaining calm later in life. So the ability to think quickly and use critical thinking skills is a very rare and very valuable skill in the modern day that your kids can learn. Possibly the aspect that you might be most appreciative of is the emotional benefits because it involves the growth of the relationship between you and your child. In this new setting, sharing special memories together in a very, very unique environment, you can create lasting memories to share together and strengthen your bond. Now, the memories that you form together will likely be very different because you might remember a certain meal you had or a certain painting you saw, but your child might remember the feeling of being in a crowded room or the climate or something of that nature, something a lot more sensory. But that being said, if you as a parent can learn how to appreciate that sensory timeline that they've pieced together for themselves, and if you can match that with your own more visual timeline, you can pair these two lenses to create the perfect window through which later on both of you can look back at your trip and make the most out of every moment that you had together. This is a very unique, very innocent, fleeting time in their lives. And if you can take advantage of their very offbeat insight into your trip, it will create a bond that neither of you will ever lose. So, who wouldn't want to travel with that face? Go and shape the next generation of Globetrotters. Thank you.